It's flooding the White House with document requests for a barrage of investigations, including 81 requests from the Judiciary Committee this week alone. What President Trump says about it.
And freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in hot water again this time over comments that she made to a reporter about President Obama. This as Democrats cap a week of division over how to handle her controversial tweets about Jews.
Meanwhile, new proposals from Democrats on the 2020 trail, where they are, and the new attacks on Bernie Sanders by the Clinton campaign. And with that, welcome to America's News headquarters from Washington. You over your jet lag yet?
Not quite, actually. I feel like I'm still dealing with it from Vietnam.
Well, great work there. Nice to be with you. Nice to be with you at home. I'm Leland Vittert.
And nice to be back with you. I'm Kristen Fisher. Well, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was sentenced to 47 months in prison this week. But Manafort will face a second sentencing on Wednesday, where he could face even more time added to his sentence. Our Garrett Tenney is here and joining us with more. And gosh, 47 months, that's a long time, but not nearly as long as what it could have been.
Yeah, 47 months, and he turns 70 next month. So it's a long time, but it's also possible this next week that he faces no additional time. So that'll be interesting to see. Now, he will face that second sentencing this week for charges of conspiracy against the United States. He pleaded guilty to those charges back in September. He's facing another 10 years in prison, according to the sentencing guidelines. But like we saw this past week, the judge could decide to give him much less time than that. Judge Amy Berman Jackson could also either add to the 47 months he was already sentenced to, or decide to have them run concurrently. While we wait on that, House Republicans also have a lot of new questions for former Trump attorney Michael Cohen after Fox News learned that staffer Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff traveled to New York at least 4 times to meet with Cohen before his public testimony last month and met with him for more than 10 hours to discuss his testimony. 2 sources familiar with the matter told Fox News that Schiff's staff discussed a wide range of topics, including the National Enquirer's catch and kill policy, America Media CEO David Pecker, and the alleged undervaluing of President Trump's assets, all of which were raised by Democrats during Cohen's public testimony. Here's Republican Congressman Mike Turner, who's demanding answers from Cohen's legal team.
These happened behind closed doors, solely with Democrat Adam Schiff's staff. No one else was present at the time. Over 10 hours of work with Michael Cohen before he came out and publicly testified. I think that the public deserves answers as to what happened during these sessions, what was discussed.
A House Intelligence Committee spokesman defended the meetings with Cohen, telling Fox News, despite this professed outrage by Republicans, it's completely appropriate to conduct proper sessions and allow witnesses to review their prior testimony before the committee interviews them. Such sessions are a routine part of every serious investigation around the country, including congressional investigations. In addition to all of this, there is the looming Mueller report, which is believed to be coming to a close, and that might sound like a broken record. We've been hearing it for more than a year now, but sources close to the probe say it is wrapping up.
It really is winding down now. All right, we'll see. Garrett Tenney, thank you so much. So for more on this, let's bring in Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, thanks for coming on the show today.
Good to be with you, Kristen.
So, Congressman, let's start with something that Garrett Tenney was just talking about, the idea that, or the reports that Adam Schiff's staff had coached Michael Cohen before his big public testimony last week. Democrats are saying that that's normal, that that's simply what you do. Do you agree with that?
Well, there is a normal meeting that takes place. It's usually rather perfunctory, but what's happened here is the reports are multiple trips to New York by staffers and up to 10 hours of prep work. That really is not normal. That might be excessive, so we need to get to the bottom of it and find out what really happened there.
So a lot of folks here in Washington believe that this marathon testimony of Michael Cohen over the last week or so has really just been the start of what could be the beginning of an attempt to impeach President Trump. So many investigations now going on, being led by the House Democrats, and they say that they're simply doing their job of congressional oversight. But you say that they are abusing their power?
Yeah, I would assert that they're abusing the power. And the first piece of evidence would be the letter that Mr. Nadler, the chairman, sent out where he said, we're now going to craft basically a public persona of this. And I'm not quoting, but I'm just kind of extrapolating what he said. What I think he's doing is he's moving to this notion of changing the narrative. He's trying to expand the narrative. And then that moves into what he's done is basically invite 81 witnesses. Everybody from Julian Assange to Michael Cohen yet again, and that is really overly broad, and it doesn't make sense to most of us looking at it objectively, trying to be objective
anyway. But the charges that Democrats are investigating are quite serious. I mean, is there at least one or two investigations that you can point to that you think are justified?
Well, when you start talking about obstruction of justice, the first thing that you do, you look at to see, was there a crime? Was there something going on that this person was actually obstructing? And so we haven't seen that. And the Mueller report doesn't come out yet. And if there's something there, then maybe we'll see something. But I haven't seen that so far. But the other stuff then becomes an attempted obstruction of justice, which is impossible to have. So it becomes very broad. And so what I'm seeing they're doing is they're actually investigating people instead of investigating a potential crime. And that's really not the way it's normally done.
I'd like to switch gears here quickly and talk about one of the other things that's really been consuming the House this week, and that is Congresswoman Omar's tweets about Jews. The House put forward a vote. They voted on an anti-hate resolution, but you decided to vote against it. Why?
Well, you know, I have a background in social science, and what we do is we try to isolate the variable. In other words, we're trying to find out the cause. We know what the cause was. We know why the resolution came forward. It was because of Ilhan Omar's series of anti-Semitic remarks. And when you have that and you bury the cause in basically a kind of a world peace type of resolution, then you effectively minimize and hide the real problem. The real problem is not that we all condemn these things. It's that Ilhan Omar has displayed anti-Semitic rhetoric that needs to stop.
So even though this was a vote for a resolution that's anti-hate, you vote against it because you say it was too broad. It wasn't specific enough, that it had been watered down too much. But isn't a vote against hate still a vote against hate? Isn't that a good thing?
Hey, well, look, you know, I said this on the floor. I despise anti-Semitism and anti-Islamophobia, and then they added everything on there. But they didn't add they added a whole bunch of things. But when you water it down like that, you are effectively letting the person who has caused this problem, you're letting her off the hook. You're no longer isolating that variable. You're no longer saying she's the reason we're here, she's anti-Semitic, or at least has indicated that by making repeated references that have brought disdain and criticism from her own party as well as people from my side. And I don't think that's the right approach here, is to say, okay, everybody needs to be nicer. We all know that. That's a given. But what you have to do is you have to isolate the person who's causing the problem and identify them and say, you need to correct. And she refused to apologize this time even.
All right, Congresswoman Biggs, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen. Welcome back.
And a Fox News alert. Live pictures from Des Moines, Iowa. Boy, we're a long way from November 2020, and already they are on the trail. Senator Bernie Sanders holding a campaign event at the Iowa State Fairgrounds. Listen in there for a minute.
Starvation wages. Here in Iowa and in states throughout this country, there are working people trying to make it on $8, $9, $10 an hour. And you know what? You cannot live in dignity on $8, $9, $10 an hour. So yes, we are going to raise the minimum wage in this country to a living wage, $15 an hour. And yes, because we understand that unions are the means by which workers have dignity on the job. We're going to make it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. And I want to give you some really good news, which is taking place as we speak. 4 years ago, when I was here in Des Moines, and we talked about the idea of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, it seemed like an impossible dream. That's more than double where the minimum wage in Washington is right now. Well, since then, I am proud to tell you that 5 states in this country have already raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
All right, Bernie Sanders with some tidbits from his usual stump speech on the trail in Des Moines, Iowa, hearing from reporters on the ground that a number of his events actually have overflow crowds that he's going to speak to before the main speech. And he is not the only one out on the trail this weekend. Amy Klobuchar, along with Elizabeth Warren, are at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas. Bernie Sanders, as you just saw, in Iowa. John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Iowa, there as well. Jeff Paul with the roundup of what they're saying on the trail. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Leland. Yeah, it'll be a packed day for Democratic presidential hopefuls who are all running campaigns with a strong message to beat Trump in 2020. We begin in Iowa. That's where, as you just saw, Bernie Sanders is campaigning today at the state fairgrounds in Des Moines. This is his 3rd campaign event in Iowa, where he also campaigned earlier in the week in Council Bluffs and in Iowa City. Sanders going heavily after younger voters, especially those who've taken out loans for college.
How many of you here now are dealing with student debt? Yes, and the crime you committed was that you decided to get the best education. Let me be very clear. As president, we are going to substantially lower student debt in this country.
Farther south in Austin, Texas, Democrats are targeting voters at South by Southwest. Senator Amy Klobuchar is speaking at the festival. Conversation about America's future right now. Senator Elizabeth Warren will also hit the stage a few hours later. Warren was just in Queens the day prior, where she took aim at the relationship between government and big tech, specifically companies like Amazon.
I want a government that isn't here to work for giant tech companies. I want a government that's here to work for the people. And today, I made a down payment on that. It is time to break up America's tech giants.
Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke will also be at South by Southwest for the premiere of a documentary about his Senate race and narrow loss to Senator Ted Cruz. Former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, and Washington Governor Jay Inslee will speak at the festival on Sunday. Elsewhere in the country, California Senator Kamala Harris is campaigning in South Carolina. Leland?
It's a long list, and it will get longer over the coming weeks and months. Jeff Paul in Los Angeles. Jeff, thanks. More on that with the panel. Meantime, after a rough week, Representative Ilhan Omar now deleting a tweet accusing a journalist of twisting her words during an interview. In that interview, she criticized President Obama on a wide range of issues. Omar released audio of that conversation in this tweet saying, Exhibit A of how reporters distort words. I'm an Obama fan. I was saying how Trump is different from Obama and why we should focus on policy, not politics. This is why I always tape my interviews. With that, we bring in Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Nice to see you, sir. Appreciate it. This is not the first tweet that Congresswoman Omar has had to delete, although the one that was an anti-Israel tweet took 6+ years to delete. Is this your Democratic Party anymore?
Not my Democratic Party. My job as a Democrat is to marginalize folks, make sure the Democrats return to the centrist positions that got them elected under Bill Clinton and others. I think the Democrats made a terrible, terrible mistake by refusing to condemn anti-Semitism and refusing to name Congresswoman Omar. Compare that to the Black Lives Movement. When the Black Lives Movement began, there was some who said, no, let's make it all lives matter. And people said, oh my God, that would be racist to exclude Black Lives Matter. That's the issue of Black lives. The same thing is true as Omar. No member of Congress has made anti-Muslim statements, but Omar has made anti-Semitic statements. So it was appropriate for Congress unanimously to condemn anti-Semitism without watering it down by including every other ism in the world. What's good for Black Lives Matters is good for Jews. Black Lives Matter.
You make an interesting point, though, in terms of not only not calling her out by name, but the leaders of the Democratic Party almost seem afraid of her and other freshmen to the far radical left. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't even call on her to apologize, and then it appeared defended her. Take a listen. We'll get your response.
Mm-hmm.
The incident that happened was, I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic. I think she has a different experience in the use of words, doesn't understand that some of them are fraught with meaning that she didn't realize.
Wow, I mean, what a defense attorney.
She said about a Southerner who might have had different experiences and was justifying the use of the Confederate flag. You cannot make excuse. Omar is an anti-Semite. She has been an anti-Semite all of her life. The statements she made recently are statements she makes to all of her friends all of the time in private. She just made the mistake of making them in public. She has to be called out. And Elizabeth Warren has to be called out for supporting her and defending her. And Senator Sanders has to be called out. And all the radical left members of the Democratic Party who are trying to turn the Democratic Party
though is, Professor,
in England have to be called out.
I guess the question, though, Professor, and you bring up England, it was Jeremy Corbyn and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who seem to be finding some new long-lost friendship ties here. The question is, you keep saying they need to be called out, but they're not being called out, and they're not even being called out by the mainstream of the Democratic Party. It was Deutsch and Eliot Engel from the Foreign Affairs Committee that called them out, and one of them was forced to walk back and almost apologize for calling her out by name, this being Ilhan Omar. The question, though, is there a Democratic Party that is okay with this, or have they left you rather than you leaving them?
Well, they're in the process of leaving me and leaving many, many other good people, Jewish, Christian, and even Muslims, who can't tolerate this kind of anti-Semitism. We don't want to see the American Democratic Party turned into Corbyn's Labor Party. First of all, it will lose, lose, lose. This is a losing strategy. It may be a winning strategy for winning a primary somewhere in the Bronx or somewhere in Michigan or Minnesota, but it is a losing primary when it comes to statewide elections or presidential elections. So for the sake of the Democratic Party, which I've been a member of for 50-something more years, and for the sake of justice and for the sake of fairness and racial equality, we have to call them out. I will continue to call them out. I would hope some Democrats would start calling them out. Some have. Some congressmen have begun to call them out, but we need more. We need the Democratic Party. We need the leadership of the Democratic Party to call them out. And I wonder why there's been
at least so far, nobody in leadership has called them out, especially recently, as we just heard from Nancy Pelosi's statement on the issue. Professor Dershowitz, always good to see you, sir. We appreciate you taking time on a Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen?
President Trump is set to release his 2020 budget proposal on Monday. The blueprint is expected to call for a decrease in domestic spending, but a big boost for defense. Our Jillian Turner is live with all the details. And Jillian, something tells me that Democrats on Capitol Hill are not going to love this.
Kristen, your hunch is correct. The budget is going to come out on Monday, just 2 days from now, and also a month past the statutory deadline. The White House blames that delay on the partial government shutdown that lasted 5 weeks, though no one seems to be paying close attention to that. Greasing the skids for this rollout, the president gave the state of the national economy a glowing review just yesterday.
The economy is very, very strong. If you look at the stock market over the last few months, it's been great. And certainly since my election, it's up getting close to 50%, the stock market. So we're obviously very happy with that.
The White House tells Fox News they're planning to balance the budget by 2034, 15 years from now, and that the president will stick with strict spending caps imposed years ago, despite the fact that lawmakers have consistently found workarounds with their own special budget deals. The Speaker of the House says she's unimpressed with the plan and that last year's Trump tax cuts need to go.
This has to be revisited, not just because of the unfairness of it, but also the impact that it has on the budget. and what budget means in terms of meeting the needs of the American people, whether it's investing in education, building an economy for the jobs for the 21st century, with innovation and allaying fears of globalization and innovation, what it means to America's workers.
The president has earmarked $750 billion for defense spending that includes backfill funds for the border wall. He believes under the current proposal he'd have enough money to complete the wall by the end of 2020. Overall, the plan increases requests for some agencies and cutbacks others, most notably the EPA. So the next step for the budget, it goes to the House and Senate, and Capitol Hill insiders say they're unlikely. They are likely, to end up debating the president's proposal until the next spending deadline, which is October 1st. So, Kristen, this means yet another government shutdown now looms just a couple of months away. So we all have something to look forward to.
Just what I wanted to hear. Thanks for bringing us the good news, Jillian.
We'll get the countdown clock ready.
Yeah.
Coming up, Jussie Smollett is back in more trouble. The new charges against the Empire actor, and Border Patrol officers dealing with a surge along the southern border. What a former ICE official says about the new Trump policy.
Every day we don't secure our border, we're allowing the crisis to worsen and lives to be endangered and exploited.
A Cook County grand jury has indicted actor Jussie Smollett on 16 felony charges in connection to that alleged assault that authorities say Smollett may have staged. Jackie Heinrich, live in New York with the latest. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, Kristen. Yeah, the Empire actor got 16 felony counts, 8 from what he told the officer who initially took that report, and 8 for what he later told a detective. This came a little more than 2 weeks after prosecutors announced 1 felony count of the same charge, disorderly conduct for making a false police report. Smollett's attorneys said he didn't expect a grand jury would bring 16 separate counts, calling it overkill, and claiming it was an attempt to distract people from the leaking of false information by the Chicago Police Department. Smollett, who is black and openly gay, told police back in January he was the victim of a hate crime. He claimed he was attacked by 2 masked men as he headed home from a Subway restaurant, claiming they beat him, poured a chemical on him, and said homophobic and racial slurs. He also said the men put a rope around his neck and shouted, "This is MAGA country," a reference to President Trump's campaign. Police said the 36-year-old staged the attack and paid 2 brothers $3,500 to carry it out. Smollett maintains his innocence.
What is happening here is, frankly, a media gangbang of this guy of unprecedented proportions. And that's the reason I got into this. I've never seen a media pendulum swing more quickly and more viciously and rob somebody of their presumption of innocence like this case.
Chicago police said Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career, saying he was unhappy with his pay. Producers of his show Empire removed his character from the last couple episodes of the season to prevent further distractions on set. Now, each count he faces is a Class 4 felony, and if he's convicted, Smollett could face up to 3 years in prison. He's set to be arraigned on March 14th.
Wow.
Kristen.
3 years. Jackie Heinrich, thank you. And later in the show, a Chicago-based federal prosecutor will join us to talk about all of these latest developments and what's next for Smollett. Leland?
Fox News Alert also out of Chicago. Live pictures there. We've seen this shot a lot, the exit from the jail there in Cook County. We're not waiting for Jussie Smollett. He's out of jail. But R. Kelly, the R&B singer who has had numerous charges against him for sexual misconduct, was back in jail for a hearing over child support. He was arrested a couple of days ago. His publicist says now the $161,000 in back child support he was owed has been paid. We'll obviously keep an eye on that live picture there at the Cook County Jail and bring it to you as he walks out and see if R. Kelly has anything to say for himself. He certainly had a lot to say on CBS.
I was just going to say, I can't get over that CBS interview and that moment with Gayle King. That was incredible.
Well, and not only that, but how Gayle King handled it, too, was pretty impressive. All right. Coming up, we'll keep a watch on Chicago. Will Representative Ilhan Omar's questionable, some say anti-Semitic comments hurt Democrats nationwide? And President Trump down in Mar-a-Lago for the weekend at his golf club right now after a federal judge issues a new legal challenge. Ellison Barber standing by in West Palm Beach with the latest. Hi, Ellison.
Hey, Leland, that judge issued an order telling the administration to reunite 2,800 migrant families who were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border. That was a couple months ago. Now that judge says his latest ruling could impact thousands more. More on that in just a minute.
Busiest hubs in America. 180 passengers came out on the slides from a smoking plane this morning. Authorities say the flight was heading for Fort Lauderdale when it made an emergency landing because of a possible fire in the cargo hold. You can see it's sitting there out on the runway. An official for the Port Authority says 2 passengers reported minor injuries that were not related to the smoke. The cause of the smoke and the alarm as well under investigation.
President Trump is spending the weekend in Mar-a-Lago after a federal judge in California ruled that the Trump administration may have to reunite thousands of additional migrant families separated at the U.S. southern border. Ellison Barber joins us now with the latest from West Palm Beach. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Kristen. Yeah, so this judge previously ordered the Trump administration to reunite about 2,800 migrant families who were separated as a result of the administration's so-called zero-tolerance policy. But then in January, an inspector general issued a report saying that the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security actually began separating migrant families nearly a year before the zero-tolerance policy was announced. The IG said that meant additional families were impacted, likely thousands of them. The ACLU said those families should be allowed to join the previous class action lawsuit. U.S. District Judge Dana Sabral of Southern California agreed, calling the IG report a significant development. He ruled in part, quote, the hallmark of a civilized society is measured by how it treats its people and those within its border. The defendants, meaning the government here, may have to change course and undertake additional effort to address these issues. Does not render modifications of the class definition unfair. It only serves to underscore the unquestionable importance of the effort and why it is necessary and worthwhile. The White House has not responded to our request for comment on this ruling, but the president was asked about immigration more generally before leaving the White House yesterday. The president's decision to declare a national emergency in order to fund the border wall has divided the Republican Party, with the Senate expecting to pass a resolution of disapproval. The president could issue his very first veto, but as he was leaving the White House yesterday, he seemed relatively unfazed by it.
We're apprehending record numbers of people, 75,000 over the last short period of time. That's a lot of work, and with a wall, we wouldn't have to do it. No, I think we're doing fine in Congress. They understand it's an emergency.
And the president is tweeting today. So far, his first and only tweet was about immigration and the need for the border wall. Kristen?
Ellison, thank you. And we're going to be taking a much deeper dive on all of those issues coming up with the former acting director of ICE. Leland?
We'll wait for that. Meantime, as much as the White House wants to play offense heading into the re-election, they face an almost daily onslaught of new investigations by House Democrats, document requests by the dozens. We bring in Democratic strategist Blake Rutherford, friend of the show. Welcome back, as always. You got this dichotomy right there in what the president wants to be talking about, which is his border policy, how he's going to be tough on immigration. Then you obviously have House Democrats launching these investigations. No question that investigations play well with the base. Certainly did when Republicans tried to take on President Obama. But do the Democrats worry about alienating the center that cares more about policy than they do the politics of document requests?
Well, I think it's a delicate balance, Leland. I mean, I don't think we would necessarily be here if the Republicans had done their job the first 2 years that they held control of Congress over President Trump. The oversight function was really
You mean
just
you're surprised
absent.
that Republicans didn't subpoena the Trump administration day in and day out? Come on.
I'm actually, considering all the facts, I am surprised. I think you still have some good government Republicans sitting on oversight. We saw that during the Michael Cohen hearing. So, of course, the Democrats need to get to the bottom of these, of what has been almost a daily, you're exactly right, daily onslaught of problems coming out of this administration. So there is a responsibility that the Democrats have.
When you listen to the Democrats talk about it, especially those to the farther part of the left, it seems as though they've decided that they want to impeach President Trump. We saw a couple of freshmen indicate that on day one, even before they'd investigated anything. So it seems almost like the old Joseph Stalin thing. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Democrats are out looking for the crime.
No, I don't. I respectfully disagree with you.
I'm sure you do.
I think that while some Democrats have talked about impeachment, I think you've seen from the party as a whole, from leadership, that's not helpful. We're certainly not there. The Democrats, and I've said this before on your program, Leland, the Democrats need to stop talking about impeachment. I think, though, there is a balance.
But they're not.
Well, I think they are. I do. I really do. I think you also, you've got to get your message out problem here that the Democrats really are suffering from. I've talked to high-ranking Democratic members who really do want policy to be at the forefront. It's gotten, certainly in the last couple of weeks, overshadowed by what I would argue are some missteps. I think that you're exactly right. I mean, to win in 2020, the Democrats have to win on policy. We tried to win an anti-Trump campaign in 16. It didn't work. We know that.
One thing that has certainly overshadowed the past couple of weeks for Democrats is Ilhan Omar, the freshman congresswoman from Minnesota. Another freshman congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, defending Omar. Where's the outrage over the 23 GOP members who voted no on a resolution condemning bigotry today? Oh, there's none. Did they get called out, raked over, ambushed in the halls, and relentlessly asked why not? No. Okay. Got it. There's a lot of backstory to this, but it certainly does not play to what you were talking about of the leadership having control over the far left parts of the party.
Well, I do think that the freshmen members of Congress as a whole all have to be mindful of their rhetoric. There's a lot of media attention on them. Words, especially tweets, as we know, can go viral in an instant. And they have to think about that stuff and be reasonable and also be mindful of what their rhetoric, the impact that rhetoric can have. We're certainly seeing
the fact that this
become a problem for the Democrats.
Happening, and you seem to acknowledge that it does keep happening and it's a problem. Does that speak to the fact that Nancy Pelosi has lost control of her own caucus, that she can't stop this?
Absolutely not. I can tell you that Speaker Pelosi is absolutely in control of her own caucus. Can she control a member tweeting in an instant or giving an interview? Of course not. She has a very large caucus and a lot going on. So I think it's very unfair to suggest that this is any reflection of the Speaker at all.
Well, she sure had a lot going on this week to deal with and a lot of fires to put out. Blake, always appreciate your time, sir. Good to see you. Enjoy New York City. We'll welcome you back to the district.
Great to see you. Thanks, Leland.
There you go. All right, Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace talks to White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow ahead of the president's big budget proposal coming out. Check your local listings for time and channel. And Bret Baier joins Howie Kurtz on Media Buzz to talk about the DNC's decision to bar Fox News from hosting a Democratic presidential primary debate, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Up next, the number of migrant families crossing the southern border is rising. We'll speak with a former ICE official on what's needed to help secure the border amid the surge.
I call it invasion. They always get upset when I say an invasion, but it really is somewhat of an invasion.
Well, as our Ellison Barber mentioned just a short time ago, a federal judge overseeing the reunification of nearly 3,000 separated migrant families now says that the Trump administration may need to reunite thousands of additional families that were forced apart at the southern border. So for more on this, let's bring in the former acting ICE director and Fox News contributor, Thomas Homan. Thomas, real quick, what's your take on that ruling?
I think it's unfortunate. I think it stinks of politics. Why isn't the ruling to reunite the families that were separated under the Obama administration? Because it happened. Why not reunite families that are separated under the Clinton administration, the Bush administration?
But the argument is that this just happened.
Border Patrol has separated families for decades when there was no evidence, clear evidence that child was relative to the person claiming to be the parent. We know based on many cases, kids are trafficked. Kids are rented by the cartels to adults because they know they come with a child, chance of being detained are very low. We know, based on the last 2,500, 2,700 separations, when that judge ordered the first 102 children under 5 to be reunited, we knew 6% of those parents after DNA testing were than the parents. So Border Patrol is doing the right thing. They're trying to protect a child. And there has been evidence and proof in cases where a child has been trafficked. It's about protecting the child.
So you think even though the government separated these families at the border, that they are not responsible for reuniting them with their families?
No, they absolutely should be reunited after they do their court time. But, you know, I can say that the general reason why they were separated before the zero tolerance policy was because there's no evidence that they were relative, that they were related. That was the major reason why they're separated.
So let's talk about this surge that we are seeing at the border, and we really got a ton of new numbers from the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen this week when she testified on Capitol Hill. Some of them, 76,000 migrants apprehended at the southern border in February. Most were families from Central America, and she also says that they're on track to apprehend nearly 1 million people crossing the border illegally. Some pretty big numbers here. Why are we seeing this surge now?
Well, I've said for 2 years this is not going to stop until Congress closes the loopholes that entice these people to come. We have been up on Hill many times on ICE director. They got to change the asylum rules because 92% of Central Americans that show up at the border claim asylum lose their case. They don't qualify. It's immigration fraud. Number two, they got to change the TVPRAs where if you're a child from Guatemala, Honduras, you're treated the same as a child from Mexico. Once they decide you're not a victim of trafficking, remove them. But there's different rules for children from Central America. They got to change the Flores settlement agreement we just talked about. That we got to be able to detain families in a family residential center, not a jail, long enough to see a judge, because most lose their cases. And let me give you a clear example why they don't like this. In 2014, when the family surges first started, we built a family detention center in Artesia, New Mexico. We held families about 40, 45 days. They saw a judge. Over 90% lost their cases. We put them on airplanes, sent them south. And what do you think happened? The illegal crossing of families dramatically decreased. But it wasn't until the Ninth Circuit says you can only detain them for 20 days. That's not time to see a judge, so they know they're going to be released. And what happened after? I said during that litigation, if you do this, it's going to result in a surge of families. That was called a fear monger. Well, guess what happened? They get detained less than 20 days. The numbers of UACs and families have skyrocketed because they know they won't be detained and they won't see a judge. They get released into society to stay here forever.
Thomas Harmon, I got to leave it right there. Thank you so much for coming on.
You got it. Thank you.
Leland.
All right, coming up, new questions about Ilhan Omar's relationship with the Jewish community and what her constituents are saying about it. Plus, Kristen Fisher's favorite person, Elon Musk. Well, his security clearance is under review by the Pentagon. What does Kristen Fisher have to say about that in defense of the SpaceX CEO? Busiest hubs in America. 180 passengers came out on the slides from a smoking plane this morning. Authorities say the flight was heading for Fort Lauderdale when it made an emergency landing because of a possible fire in the cargo hold. You can see it's sitting there out on the runway. An official for the Port Authority says 2 passengers reported minor injuries that were not related to the smoke. The cause of the smoke and the alarm as well under investigation.
President Trump is spending the weekend in Mar-a-Lago after a federal judge in California ruled that the Trump administration may have to reunite thousands of additional migrant families separated at the U.S. southern border. Ellison Barber joins us now with the latest from West Palm Beach. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Kristen. Yeah, so this judge previously ordered the Trump administration to reunite about 2,800 migrant families who were separated as a result of the administration's so-called zero tolerance policy. But then in January, an inspector general issued a report saying that the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security actually began separating migrant families nearly a year before the zero tolerance policy was announced. The IG said that that meant additional families were impacted, likely thousands of them. The ACLU said those families should be allowed to join the previous class action lawsuit. U.S. District Judge Dana Sabral of Southern California agreed, calling the IG report a significant development. He ruled in part, quote, the hallmark of a civilized society is measured by how it treats its people and those within its border. The defendants, meaning the government here, may have to change course and undertake additional effort to address these issues. Does not render modifications of the class definition unfair. It only serves to underscore the unquestionable importance of the effort and why it is necessary and worthwhile. The White House has not responded to our request for comment on this ruling, but the president was asked about immigration more generally before leaving the White House yesterday. The president's decision to declare a national emergency in order to fund the border wall has divided the Republican Party, with the Senate expecting to pass a resolution of disapproval. The president could issue his very first veto, but as he was leaving the White House yesterday, he seemed relatively unfazed by it.
We're apprehending record numbers of people 75,000 over the last short period of time. That's a lot of work, and with a wall, we wouldn't have to do it. No, I think we're doing fine in Congress. They understand it's an emergency.
And the president is tweeting today. So far, his first and only tweet was about immigration and the need for the border wall. Kristen?
Ellison, thank you. And we're going to be taking a much deeper dive on all of those issues coming up with the former acting director of ICE. Leland?
We'll wait for that. Meantime, as much as the White House wants to play offense heading into the re-election, they face an almost daily onslaught of new investigations by House Democrats, document requests by the dozens. We bring in Democratic strategist Blake Rutherford, friend of the show. Welcome back, as always. You got this dichotomy right there in what the president wants to be talking about, which is his border policy, how he's going to be tough on immigration. Then you obviously have House Democrats launching these investigations. No question that investigations play well with the base. Certainly did when Republicans tried to take on President Obama. But do the Democrats worry about alienating the center that cares more about policy than they do the politics of documents?